This is Dune Talk, a DuneNewsNet.com production. Join us now for the latest Dune news, reactions, and lively discussions.
Hey everybody. So in some countries, people are already watching Dune. You guys are so lucky. So this is the show where we're going to talk about all the news relating to the movie, relating to the teasers, and start looking at those box office numbers. It's a really exciting time. This is Marcus Gabriel, editor at Dune Newsnet. So excited to be here. And I'm here today with Garin.
Hey, it's Garin at DuneCompanion.com on Twitter and DuneCompanion.com online. It's
Johnny Stopcheck. I'm on Twitter. You know where I'm from.
Simon Dowdy here. On Twitter, also no cool Dune name, and sadly, I still have not seen the movie, but I have friends overseas, and I know stuff.
And we have a special returning guest, Mark from DuneInfo. So, Mark, you're in the UK. Are you really jealous that all your neighboring countries have seen the movie and you haven't?
Yeah, I'm not particularly happy. Originally, the UK was meant to be getting it on the 17th of September as well, and then it got pushed back to the 21st, so just before the US. So yeah, all of our neighbouring countries have seen it, but not the UK. Something else I'm blaming Brexit for.
I understand that you will see it slightly earlier than other people in the UK. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. The BFI in London have had a Road to Dune series over the past couple of months, very similar to the one we've been doing on Discord, where they've been showing every one of Denis Villeneuve's previous films, and that culminates on Tuesday the 5th of October, so about 3 weeks early, 2.5 weeks early, going down to London to see that. So very excited to see that.
Nice. Well, maybe we should plan to have you again on the show around then.
I'll try and keep it spoiler free if that's the case.
Nice. Yeah. So as mentioned, there's a lot to talk about. Today is going to be all focused on the movie, of course. So let's go ahead and talk some Dune movie news.
Dune movie news.
So the first story for today is Toronto International Film Festival. So the festival started on the 11th, and we had the very first screenings of Dune on IMAX last weekend on the Saturday and Sunday. So there was an introduction by Denis. We had some excellent interviews with the director and with Rebecca Ferguson. And also today, when we're recording this, which is the 18th, Denis is going to be honored as part of the tribute awards of the Toronto International Film Festival, so the Ebert Director Award. So that's something that we'll be touching on later as well. So let me start with you, Mark. Have you followed the news around Toronto International Film Festival? What were the big takeaways for you?
I think everything was just how impressive it looks on IMAX. IMAX is the format that it needs to be seen on. So there's been a number of comparison videos that IMAX has been putting out about how you need to see it in the full frame. Although bizarrely they've put them on Instagram, so you see in a square frame and cropped, and so it's not the ideal format to promote IMAX, but that seems to be the key thing. And I don't know if you saw, but there was a couple of guys outside IMAX in Toronto with wanting Dune tickets, and IMAX Twitter was trying to locate them so they could give them some IMAX swag. I'm sure they'd have preferred Dune tickets, but maybe they'll settle for the swag.
Nice. So, Johnny, what was stood out for you for the festival?
Yeah. Mark, mentioned a lot of it already. I think another main takeaway was just that it was nice to see another large batch of reactions and reviews on top of what we already got at Venice, because of course it's a different audience, it's a different continent, different sensibilities and things like that, and it again seemed to be pretty much about the same, I would say, as far as like how it was divided up between, you know, people loving it, people liking it, people being kind of like mixed on it. And I think that honestly, it's been really interesting to watch and hear the different reactions. Because I would say, again, the vast majority have been positive, whether, you know, it's mildly positive or like very, very positive. But I feel like there's been every single aspect of the film has someone that thinks it's a 10, like amazing, or someone that thinks it's like like under like whelming or like not really working for them. And so I think it's interesting. This seems like it is, you know, Villeneuve has said that he wanted this to be his most accessible, most mainstream, I guess you could say, kind of film compared to his other ones, which have been more like adult or more like art house, if you will. And I think this is just the reaction so far have kind of shown to me, at least, that it's still like Villeneuve, like it's still 100% like his, you know, mode for the most part. And, you know, it's not going to be for everyone necessarily, just like 2049 isn't necessarily for everyone, or, you know, some of his other films. But I'm really, really happy so far. And TIFF has, you know, again, that's just another piece of it. We have New York Film Festival coming up as well, which will be another big, you know, spot for them to get, you know, a lot of press from, more reactions, more reviews. But even overseas now, as you mentioned at the top of the show, we have fans, actual mainstream general audience members going to see it now in the thousands, which is just kind of crazy to think about, given that no one had seen this movie a couple of weeks ago. It's looking really good. I'm feeling really positive about it. It's exciting.
Touching on what I mentioned earlier about the TIFF tribute awards, so obviously that's really special for Denis, because it's you know, that's where he's from. So it's great to see that the festival is honoring in that way. From the perspective of overall awards, like, how should we see this, Johnny? Like, how does this award compare to some of the other director awards?
Yeah, I mean, it's, as you mentioned, you're right in saying it is special because of his, you know, attachment to the festival. I mean, he's been going there for years. I feel so like, I feel old, which is going to be crazy for anyone, you know, listening, or anyone else that's on this podcast. But like, I remember in 2016 when Arrival was at TIFF, and just that was when I was really starting to get to know him as a filmmaker. And so now looking back at it, and of course, previously, I think he had also had Enemy there. He had Prisoners. I think Sicario might have also gone to TIFF. So it's like, there's a number of, you know, of films that he's had like kind of circled through there. And so the festival is very familiar with him. I watched some of his, you know, the interview he did, like the Q&A, and also the introduction that the director of the festival, the creative director, made for him, which was very, you know, gracious. It just kind of speaks to, you know, how they kind of view him, how they feel about him. They were very much excited and looking forward to giving him the award. And of course, you know, it's, you know, they handpick these people based on, you know, who's going to be there, or like which films are we showing. But it's again, just another kind of accolade you can kind of throw on there, and just another like extra little thing that gives him attention and gives him some sort of you know, credential, especially, you know, if you're thinking long term and you're thinking award season, as a lot of people have been talking about and thinking about already, as the festivals, you know, bring that thinking into the process. It's another extra little thing that you can consider, you know, going in and kind of adding those things up.
And Garin, thinking about the reactions from the festival, like the IMAX premiere overall, and or those interviews that we had with the director and Rebecca Ferguson, was there anything that stood out to you?
Yeah, I mean, the thought that came to me was, you know, Denis in his home country, he talked about in that Q&A interview that, you know, there's people out there in the audience that know me really well. They really know about me. And so I was a little guarded maybe on the reactions, or maybe some of the responses being maybe a little too strong or too positive. But overall, it felt a lot like Venice. It felt like a similar distribution of responses. I loved the Q&A though. I thought that was just gold. Being able to see Denis speak so offhandedly and candidly, I just loved it. I think I watched that a couple of times, if not 3 times, because so the stuff he talks about, we've all heard before. You know, he read Dune when he was 13 or 14. He was influenced as a teenager, but to hear him go in depth about the influence of Lawrence of Arabia, I loved that sequence where he talks about that. Even his interactions with Rebecca Ferguson, who plays Jessica, I loved that interaction to show that, you know, she talks about how they were a unified group of people. They were a unit, she said, and that comes from a director who really knows what he's doing and creates that unity through his leadership. So there's just a lot in that Q&A that, I mean, I could probably go on for 20 minutes about it, because to me, that was real deep insight into why Denis wanted to do this. He wanted to do it his way, and he stuck to his guns. And so far, you guys, it's paying off. Him doing it the way he wanted to do it in 2 films, being able to make it accessible to everyone, which I think is the only way you could do this film. That was the problem with David Lynch's 84. It wasn't accessible to everyone. It just wasn't. And this one, apparently, so far, is maybe not to everyone, but to the larger audiences. So yeah, there's a lot in that Q&A that I love. Those are some highlights.
Yeah, and I love hearing that comment from Rebecca Ferguson. I mean, you know, when people work together with a great director, a lot of times you see this like great professional relationship, and you know how they admire the director's talent and everything. But like you know, when you heard Rebecca speaking about speaking so affectionately about him, it's like he really like developed like these strong relationships with them. And as you're saying, it was like a family unit that was working on this film.
Yeah, I would just chime in real quick because that Garin made some great points. I had honestly forgotten some of the things that he had said and kind of like what exactly the Q&A was like. But, you know, you mentioned hearing him talk, you know, about, you know, of course, the film, but also his upbringing, like his older, like, you know, connection to like the novel. It just reminds me, because again, I've been watching him for years. Like I've been watching him interviews, Q&As, those kinds of things at film festivals. And of course, he's, you know, English isn't his first language, which I think we all know by this point. But it's been so cool to see him kind of evolve, because he was a small, you know, French Canadian like art house filmmaker, you know, just 10 years ago. I mean, Encendi was, you know, a little over 10 years ago. So like to watch him evolve and become like just so like he can work a room so well, I feel like, and his confidence and his, you know, his ability to like really communicate and articulate like his thoughts and his feelings about, you know, things that might be kind of niche or kind of harder to understand, especially related to Dune, which is already kind of like a dense, you know, complicated book, has been really, really cool to see. And, you know, hearing Rebecca talk about it as well. She did, I think the 2 of them did something with Variety, where an interview where they posted some clips that I saw. And yeah, just the way that she talks about him so passionately. And you know, I covered the entire, you know, film industry, and I hear a bunch of stories. I read a bunch of stories, and I can tell you, and I think everyone knows this, but like it doesn't go without saying that, you know, there are a lot of not so nice filmmakers and directors and people who are difficult to work with. And, you know, you hear stories about how you have to be like cruel to get like great art, or people, you need to make people suffer and go through like these absurd lengths. And I think Denis is like a perfect example of someone who doesn't feel the need to do that, and is actually the complete opposite of that, and is very, you know, kind and like open and communicates really well and wants to work and make it like a family environment. And I think also talking about awards, because you know, you asked me about that a minute ago. I think that all that we just discussed and that Garin hit on is going to be huge as far as like, again, longer into the award season. He has like a really great story, I think, for this movie, and like a strong narrative in that sense. That it is like this childhood dream, and it's like such a passion project, and everyone involved has such nice and good things to say about him. He worked with Guillermo del Toro, you know, to work on the edit, and he had him look at the movie. Chloe Zhao has been, her name's been huge over the last 12 months, and has spoken so highly of the film, and she was at the Venice premiere. Kenneth Branagh, this was mentioned on Twitter, he showed up at one of the Dune screenings in TIFF and said it was just like mind-blowing, like jaw-dropping experience. So all these people who are Academy Award-winning directors, producers, Kenneth Branagh is going to be in the conversation this Oscar season for Belfast as a director, as a producer and a screenwriter. I think that again goes a long way, and that's going to be interesting to see how that develops, because I think that is worth mentioning and worth keeping an eye on.
Simon, to you, final thoughts on TIFF?
The interviews with Denis and I was going to say Lady Jessica as well, Rebecca Ferguson, just so humble, both of them, and you can really see the experience that they had. And I know people call Denis the hawk, but I'm going to call him a bear because he's a giant teddy bear. He just seems like a genuine guy that's living the best life that he can. And, getting the award for TIFF is probably a big honor for him, because can you guys think of 5 Canadian filmmakers that are legendary? And I think Denis is probably one of maybe the most successful Canadian filmmaker right now. And if I'm wrong, please someone comment on YouTube or tweet at me and be like, no. But honestly, it's just so nice seeing so much love for this project all around. And once again, seeing it on IMAX, I think really changed people's point of view. I think people were excited about it after Venice, but hearing the IMAX hype, which is what we want, because we want people to go see it in the theater. I do agree with Mark. Those Instagram little featurettes are killing me. I love Instagram. It's my favorite social media, but do not show them as little squares because it messes everything up. Overall, more excited. I hate my friends overseas that seen it, that called me the other day, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. Just give me the movie. I'm up to the point where I want to open my Christmas present.
Also, real quick, I have to mention, as far as Canadian filmmakers go, Jim Cameron might have a word on the as far as notoriety and success, I guess.
Is Jim Cameron really Canadian?
Yeah.
Oh,
and David Cronenberg, I guess, but he's not done much recently.
That's true.
Okay.
Hey, Jim Cameron hasn't done anything really recently either, I guess.
Look, I'm not a big Jim Cameron fan because, but Cronenberg is one of my favorite filmmakers, and I feel really bad. I'm just going to be quiet for a little bit now.
It's a little bit weird because some of Cronenberg's early shorts are at the same university that Enemy was filmed in. That's brutalist architecture. So there's a bit of crossover on the architecture between Cronenberg and Villeneuve, I think.
I'm going to look up this Jim Cameron thing.
We stay humble on this show, right, guys?
We do what Denis would do.
Hey, I wanted to mention one more thing about that Q&A that stuck out to me is I loved how the person asking the questions asked Rebecca. He said to her, what kind of influence did you or input did you get to have on the development and evolution of the character of Jessica? And I loved her answer because her answer was Lady Jessica was already fleshed out, right? The book, as Denis keeps saying, was the Bible for the creation of this film. And I loved how she gave credit right back to Lady Jessica already existed, already fleshed out to the levels that were necessary, and that she felt like she was given enough space to elevate that character as she already existed, not to sort of redo it or tear it down and rebuild it, but that homage to the book, which I love every time they bring this up, because that makes me feel good about the honoring this book that I love so much. But I think sometimes in the creation of these films, because creative people, it's an exciting experience. You have lots of ideas and you want to explore different avenues, but the fact that they stuck to the source material within some boundaries, right? I'm sure they had flexibility, and even the script goes beyond, in some regards, the role of women in this story, which is awesome. We want that. We want the role of women to be expanded in this film, which it is. But that sticking to the source material, I just think, is critical for the success of this film.
Next story for today, which is all these featurettes, teasers that have come out over the past week or so. We had the films for IMAX. We had some behind the scenes. We had the accolades teasers. So let me start with you, Mark, because I know that you've also been on top of all of these. In terms of new footage or new insights, what stood out most to you from all this fresh content?
Ooh, that's a good question. There's been so many teasers and stuff. Warner Brothers Singapore in particular seems to be killing it at the moment with every day there's one or two more TV spots or teasers or promos for it. There was some footage from, I think it was a German TV show, where we had the Baron scene with Baron and Peiter, which sort of which explains a little bit more of the footage that we've seen with the Bene Gesserit going to Gedi Prime, which isn't a scene in the book, and that fleshes out the reason for that. So, and that's a proper scene. It's not just a small clip. It's a minute or two. So that was probably my favorite out of the ones recently.
Yeah. You actually posted a full 10 minutes behind the scenes clip. Was that from the German TV show?
It was from another international television show, and they had a clip, and they had, rather than the snippets, they had 12 minutes continuous. Well, actually, it was more than that, because it had the Gurney and Paul fight, which we've seen already. It had the Baron and Peiter scene. It had Jessica giving a Mapes scene, and it had the Paul and Chinese scene with the Chris knife. But without any audio, they were just playing in the background. So I did post those to YouTube. The various scenes from the film got blocked instantly, and the behind the scenes footage got blocked after a couple of hours, even though this is official footage that Warner Brothers have given to various marketing places to run on their adverts, on their interviews and promos. But maybe they didn't like it all in one place, all in one go. I don't know.
Yeah. So there was a lot more of the Baron than we had seen before, like that scene. So I guess maybe they wanted to keep that for now.
The Baron one's fine. The Baron ones, they didn't have a problem with me posting the Baron one. It was the other ones.
Yeah. And one of the things that I really liked, especially in the IMAX teaser, was the ornithopters. You know, like we got to see them like in flight, see more of them. And I have to see, like, the more I see these ornithopters, these things are just awesome. You know, I can see these becoming like iconic in the way that the X-Wing is iconic, like in the past 20 years. I mean, these things are just so cool, and that dynamic with the wings. So yeah, really excited. Keep seeing more of these on the IMAX screen.
Yeah, I want a model on my desktop, please. So whoever at Legendary is listening, I want this licensed and something I can put on my desk.
Hey, you guys.
If it's got flapping wing actions, even better. But
I want to say something about the ornithopters. That was the one part of the original book and the series that I knew if it was envisioned correctly, it could be, one of the coolest, flying vehicles ever in science fiction. And yet you could also do it really corny, because, the term ornithopter just means a flying machine, right? So some people envision that with like the wings of a bird actually flapping, and to go with sort of this dragonfly design. At first, I didn't know what to think of that. I kind of thought, ooh, that's a little strange. I don't know if that's going to work very well. Every time I see these things, it's like I'm just blown away. I can't stop looking at them, and they play such a critical part in the story. They're like a character in this story, and so I just think they've done a brilliant job. And the CGI is just so smooth and realistic, and so I want to start an ornithopter fan club. I'm so excited about it.
Every time I see one, I think of you, Garin. I'm like, oh, he's probably freaking out over the scene. Well, Mark and Garin and Johnny and Marcus, if I see any that show up at work as low models, I will buy you each one and send them to you. But get that license. Yeah, hopefully McFarlane makes a big one where you can actually put your figures in.
And Simon, any other highlights from the new footage?
Oh my God, there's so much footage. It's up to the point where I'm like, did I already see this? Did I miss something? I love all of it. And I feel like we're getting kind of the same footage, but in different shots and different angles. Once again, it's not overkill, but it's just like, I'm jealous of the rest of the world. I'm really jealous. I wish. It's funny because I was looking on my Facebook, and 7 years ago I was in France visiting family, and I wish I was in France right now because I would watch the living crap out of that movie.
Yeah, and I really like also the more that we're getting behind the scenes, because that gives a lot of insights into how the actors and the crew felt. Like you see that shot of Paul, and he's walking in the governor's residence and looking at the sandworm mural, and like you see the camera crew recording him, and it's basically like he's there, like he's in this enormous set looking at this enormous mural. Like, I mean, how immersive is that for the actors who are filming those scenes? Let's go to you, Johnny. What was your highlights out of these all these new teasers and trailers?
Yeah, well, it's funny what you just mentioned, talking about like that, the big base relief, sandworm, like it's huge. And I'm just thinking about like the time and effort that went into probably like designing that and building it. Whereas like some other movies, they don't even, the gun you might be holding is going to be green screened in later. Like they don't even know what the hell you're going to be using. So yeah, it's definitely nice to see. There's just so much. I'm like overwhelmed because I feel like every time I see something new, like I've seen a lot, obviously, at this point. I mean, I went to the IMAX event, which is probably, I mean, it's more than 99.9% of what people have seen, obviously. And just, I feel like I can't be more amazed or more excited or blown away by something. And then they show like just a few more like shots. And I'm like, wow. I never expected that to look like that, or I'm like shocked that looks as good as it does, or that they, how they designed that or shot this. I think maybe, I mean, that with the really cool thing I've been thinking about the most, I think, in the last 24 hours or so has been the Hans Zimmer behind the scenes, like special featurette that they showed. Of course, a lot of that is focused on the score and talking about how it influences the film and how Hans Zimmer and his team designed it. But they showed a lot of new footage, and just, I mean, I can't get over, like, we talk so much about how big the movie is and like the scale and the scope of it and everything. But, it's hard to, I mean, I feel like there's not really been a movie that looks so big and is so big. Lord of the Rings has been the main comparison that people have drawn and continue to reference that. I mean, there's one new shot that we got yesterday, which I think is the Harkonnens on Arrakis. And they're all in formation, and there's these massive ships, like the biggest ships you have ever seen in a movie. And it just reminds me, like, the only other thing I can think of is like, Return of the King, or, the Two Towers, where you just look out and there's just endless soldiers, like, in formation or marching. And just, even so, there's that like end of the spectrum. And then there's the tiny little intricate details and like the simplest things. Like there's this shot of, I think, the Baron's bath, where it's just like filling up and mixing together. And I'm just like mesmerized by like just the way they decided to capture that, really focus in. Yeah, it's great. I can't get enough of it. And I'm sure, of course, all this is being thrown out because the global release is ongoing and it's in Europe right now, and that's such a big market. And so you have IMAX and Dolby and all these different kind of factors that have their own cool little video clips and highlights and things that they're all releasing now. So I'll be curious to see how that's going to work in the next few weeks as we get closer to the US release, if they're going to have new things to promote or if they're going to be kind of like recycling through. But I mean, people are excited, and I'm certainly one of the most excited, and I'm really loving everything we're seeing so far. And of course, they have started to promote and put out the big kind of TV spot or online spots with the critic, adjectives thrown in there and the different ratings and stuff. And I'm sure that's something I haven't seen any TV spots yet. That's usually in the last month or so, and we're just about to cross that threshold. So I think that's something that we'll be seeing more of, and they'll be leaning into more as we get close.
So that scene that we see Paul looking at, as I like to say, the golden path with the sandworm. All I can think of every time I see that is J.J. Abrams being very proud of The Force Awakens and being like, we're using practical effects. Practical effects. Well, guess what? Denis is really using practical effects right there. Yeah, that shot's been out for a while, and every time I see that, I'm just blown away by it. How gorgeous and how massive that must be. I wonder if Denis has that in his living room now. Just like, yeah, I made that movie.
Let's go to our third topic, which is audience reaction. So people have, hundreds of thousands of people potentially have already seen this movie in these different countries. So let's start with you, Simon. I know that you've been hearing from the people on the ground in France. So what have been like the big reactions that you've heard so far?
So I'm very disappointed. My nephew was supposed to go see it, but I think his girlfriend didn't want to go see it opening day. So I don't like you, girlfriend. No, but overall, I talked to one of my friends, Darren, for over an hour about it. And he told me he took a couple of friends with him. He saw it actually on the premiere night, and then he went back. And I think at the point of recording it, I think he's recording the show. I think he's seen it 3 times already. So he took a couple of friends, and all his friends were like, oh my God, I want this. I want to know what happens next. I went in full spoiler mode. I asked him a bunch of questions, which I'm not going to share. But overall, what everyone is saying is that it's epic. It is this generation's Lawrence of Arabia. And as a Lawrence of Arabia fan also, as one of my top 3 movies of all time, Dune might be up there now, and I don't want to make Dune the obvious choice. Well, I love Dune, so of course Dune's gonna be one of my favorite movies. But reactions are great. The pacing is what a lot of people are saying. That it's not very jump cut, go to the next scene. Very much without going in full spoiler mode. The breakfast scene that we saw in the IMAX preview, it feels like that. Denis lets his characters breathe, which is crucial. And something that I keep hearing a lot is the details on every set, every little items. Like one of the French YouTubers I was watching was saying, like, I'm sure you can pause this and see even engraving, on everything. It's just a piece of art. I hate using the word masterpiece, but apparently it is. The only complaint I've heard mostly is Chalamet is kind of robotic, but you need that, like we were saying, until something happens to create that arc where Paul changes. And one YouTuber said that Oscar Isaac should grow back his beard because that is a crime against humanity. But overall, people are loving it. I mean, I haven't heard any negative stuff. And look, I'm French. I can say it. We complain about a lot of stuff. So if the French people are not complaining about Dune overall, magnifique. Yeah, I can't wait to see it. I can't wait to hear more reactions, but it's positive all around.
Yeah, with the French stuff, I'm just wondering how much of the fact that the director and the star have been on. It seems like every French TV show speaking French. And that must be unusual in non-English speaking countries to have an almost native speaker of your language being able to converse without interpreters or subtitles.
So France loves any American actor that can speak a little bit French. It's like, I don't know, they love it. It's a weird fetish they have, I think. But I think Denis speaking French and Timothy going on French TV, I'm sure has only helped a lot. But Dune is pretty popular, the book, what I remember in France. Like
Oh yeah,
it
they love it in France. They've got that's just come out last week, which is the second edition of the Dune book. Excuse me. So it's now called All About Dune, with extra interviews in there and stuff. There's a new couple of magazines with articles and interviews. So these are really good if you can speak French. If not, just look at the pictures like I do and drool over them. So yeah, France has got a lot of good Dune material at the moment.
And also what a lot of people are saying, it's I don't know how to translate it really in English, but they're calling it a hard sci-fi. It's not, I guess what it would translate, it's not popcorn type of Star Wars sci-fi. This is sci-fi at its best. Like, this is really science fiction. It's grounded. Overall, the positive reviews, and I have a friend on Instagram, and I totally forgot what country you're from. Other Mark. I feel like I'm surrounded by Marks now in my life. And he loved it. He saw it opening night. He told me it was everything that he could imagine and more. And once again, everyone's reaction, I want to see part 2. Make this happen, Warner Brothers.
So overall, like I said earlier, that a lot of the reviews that I saw coming out of TIFF and recently from those that have seen it in Europe is mostly positive. I've read a few lukewarm responses. That can be for a lot of reasons. Maybe it's the expectation. As I have said before on this podcast, though, I'm still not seeing that statement. I'm confused, I'm lost, I have no idea what's going on here. So again, I just think that's the linchpin to making sure that, and I think recently Denis stated this, and maybe it was in that TIFF Q&A, where he actually stated, I wanted to make this available to those who hadn't read the book, although there's so many people that have. And so he's got to have time to explain that in the first movie, which is why you need 2 movies. You've got to have time to set up this world, lay the foundation for what it is, so that people can then further explore the story with part 2 and hopefully Dune Messiah. So one of the articles that I really like, I'm a big fan of Ryan Britt. He writes for Den of Geek and some others. And I really like how he goes super deep sometimes. I'll bet sometimes people can't quite keep up with him, because he really dives into some of the psychology of why a film gets made, and particularly why Dune is being made now, and why is it relevant now. But throughout this article, he's basically stating there is no one who was better prepared than Denis to make this film. Even his pedigree of what he made before Arrival, making Blade Runner 2049. It was almost like the path to be the director of Dune. And I'm sure in the back of his mind, and he's even said this, it is his dream project. You know, did he choose those projects perhaps so that he could be ready for Dune? Maybe some of you know that. I'd love to know that. But, you know, one of the things that Ryan Britt says in this article is he mentions that, so if Dune does its job, it won't just start conversations about the future of cinema, but perhaps the future of the planet too. In real life, there may be no golden path for humanity, but for now, with one ambitious work of cinematic expression, the sleeper has awakened. So, you know, Ryan goes really into some psychological places where the reason that this movie is relevant now, and the reason it hopefully will resonate with audiences, is because it's tapping into these themes, maybe similar to the way that Star Wars did in the 70s, right? To be able to tap into these themes that we want to explore, that we want to think about, that we want to talk about. And so for him to give not just a review that is positive about this film is well done, it's well crafted, the story is compelling, but actually to say this movie has social relevance to who we are today and what we're dealing with. And I think it was Rebecca Ferguson that said something along the lines of, you know, in this day and age, with the things we're dealing with, we do need escape. We do need a place to go. I think she mentioned that, you know, in times of economic turmoil or social strife, people sometimes turn to musicals or sci-fi, right? Well, talk about escape. That's what Denis doing with this film. He's asking you to go into a theater and literally be transported out of your world to another universe. And so Ryan is really kind of tapping into the fact that here's a person who is capable, and he has done that with this film. So anyway, I love going deep on that stuff, and I'm just excited that he's seeing all those relevant themes for our society today.
And I think we touched on it, like when we were talking about reviews. I think that's so important, because you can give a review of the movie itself. Like you can say, okay, this is a good movie. Look at the cinematic approach, look at the acting and all that. But I think to get the whole picture of Dune, if you're familiar with the source material, that's really key. And I think that's going to be really important. I think people are going to enjoy this movie, and you know, there's going to be an opportunity to discuss all these deeper themes. But as we've all been saying, like, you know, getting the part 2 and then the Dune Messiah, where we really go deep into some of those messages about society and humanity, I think that's going to be really important for our society. You know, like even when he was filming Incendies 10 years ago, and he was in the desert of Jordan, he was already thinking, okay, this is, you know, where I'm going to film Dune. This is where Paul sits. And he did talk about how, you know, it was after filming Arrival and Blade Runner 2049 that he finally felt that he was in a position to take on a project like Dune. So I think that was, he was definitely working with this vision long term. And it's exciting to see him also talking about, you know, Dune Messiah and how he's thinking about that long term as well.
But thank goodness as he did that, Marcus, as his technical filmmaking skills grew through Arrival and Blade Runner 2049, he didn't give up that focus on the characters, the story, the relationships. You know, that's the statement I keep hearing, that this is an indie film on a grand scale, right? It retained that indie personal, like he talks about how the movie is a lot of real close-ups, which indicates, you know, intimacy and personal connection. And then these massive, you know, wide shots. There's not a lot of mid shots, and that's interesting because you're getting this combination of an indie, personal, feeling, emotional based sort of experience, but then it's surrounded by this massive world building. So it's exciting to me.
Yeah, in one of the interviews, I think it's in one of the magazines, they talk about the choice of IMAX, and then he says he wants to do a film 100% in IMAX at one point, which would be great. But he says with the desert, normally when you have a desert shot, you have the huge widescreen landscape, and he wanted an IMAX one, so you actually feel the weight of that environment pressing down on the individual. So it's not an expansive environment, it's a crushing environment. And so I can't wait to see it in IMAX.
So I want to dive into the box office results, which is our fourth story for today. So based on the reports we have through Friday, we're looking at a 16 million gross. So keep in mind that Dune has opened in Western Europe, Russia, CIS, and a couple of the Southeast Asia countries. So on just looking at Friday, there was an additional 7.5 million, and that was adding to the strong openings that we had on during the weekdays, because the earliest previews were on Tuesday evening. So we've seen that especially Russia and France have been strong. With in Russia the best openings of the pandemic so far is 3.3 million so far, and France likewise, it was one of the best opening days, and at 3.2 million so far. So Johnny, I want to start with you. Like, how do you perceived these box office results so far, and what are your estimates, projections for the rest of the weekend?
Yeah, so this is, this is very, I don't know if I'd say best case scenario potentially, but it's very, very good. Like I was already bullish, of course, more than probably literally anyone, but I think it's safe to say that this is, it's a legitimate, like, not debatable overperformance. Like it's above the actual like industry projections. It's above even people outside the industry who are also analyzing it and taking a look at it. Because Deadline, I know they posted an article just before the screening started saying, what to expect, what the numbers could be. And they said mid-20s essentially. And of course, the opening day numbers and the preview numbers which is included in that, in a lot of the major markets, Russia, France, Italy, those were, incredibly impressive, especially in Russia and France, I think were by far the biggest. Russia, it was the biggest opening day of the year for a movie in Russia. Third biggest of the year in Italy. France had the biggest as well. So it's I don't think anyone was expecting that necessarily, which is the best thing you can say. And the fact that it's most likely, at this point going to be about 10 million or so over what the industry projection of mid 20s was. It's going to come in around 35 million most likely for the opening. That's a very good thing, especially when you're dealing with, that's 10 million, but the percentage of that it's going to be over what they were saying is significant. And that bodes very, very well, of course, for the potential when you combine that, not just with people, if the same number of people was going and then afterwards 50% of them were like, well, that sucked, or like, I don't really care about that, I'm not like really interested in seeing more of that, that would be one thing. But to have these big numbers and to have vast majority positive reactions and people being vocal about, I really want a part two, or I want to see what happens next, that kind of thing. That's very good. And also, this is something I highlighted, on social media last night. And that's something that I've noticed because I have been kind of monitoring, every now and then going through and seeing what people are saying. I picked up on some French, like phrases and things like that. But really just the people who are saying that, they've either already seen it several times, 2, 3, 4 times, or that they plan on seeing it, in the future, next week, next weekend, whatever. And the amount of people saying, they've seen it in IMAX, those are multipliers. So you have people seeing it a number of times. You have people seeing it in IMAX, which is, going to be an extra cost for the ticket versus a regular ticket. Those are all really good. So that is encouraging. And also even in places, we've been talking mostly about Europe, but, Taiwan, for example, Singapore, where it's been opening, those numbers have also been impressive. I know in Taiwan, its opening day figure was $250,000 in sales, and that was just $20,000 behind Shang-Chi's opening. So again, Shang-Chi has been a huge success. People have really been hyping that movie up, and this was just behind that. And that's one of the the biggest, most popular, successful, established franchise in movie history. I think that close proximity is very encouraging, and I can't wait to see what the final numbers are looking like. And then, of course, even next week we have, I think, mostly, if not all, Middle Eastern markets are going to be getting it as well, like the UAE where they filmed it, and Saudi Arabia and places like that. So that'll be another thing to look forward to. But yeah, these are looking very, very good. And I noticed, we've been talking a lot about France and Russia in reactions and reviews. And I think overall, not just between the critics and the audience that's showing up for it, again, pretty much universal, at least liking the movie, if not loving it. And that, again, if these people are, seeing it this weekend, I know Bond is something that's on the horizon. No Time to Die is going to be coming out, I think, in a couple weeks, about 2 weeks, in most of these big markets, the same ones we've been talking about. So next weekend, if people are really loving it that much, and if word of mouth is really good, they come out of the movie, they tweet, oh, this movie is amazing, like go see it in the theater and all that. I think next weekend could be pretty solid because I think legs is the one thing that people are most concerned about because it could be front loaded or it could have a lot of people showing up on opening night or showing up opening weekend and then kind of fall off. But if people are like, oh, I'll go see it again next weekend because I loved it so much, or I'm going to bring my friend to go see it, or I'm going to tell them to go see it, that could help and translate. And that'll be something, again, interesting to watch. Weekend 2 numbers for these territories and then weekend 1 numbers for the other ones that we mentioned. And again, that's going to snowball into the tickets are going to be going on sale in a couple weeks for the US and for the UK. So all this hype and all this attention that's on this movie right now, that's going to be like, oh, well, if people are going crazy for that, I better like go and get tickets. And then also you have these other big movies coming out prior to Dune in the US. And this is something people have been asking me about this, and people have been kind of questioning, why is it so, why are we getting this a month later than some of these, European countries? And there's like a million, there's a battery of reasons for that. And I'm not going to go into detail about it, but you have these big movies, coming out in the US before. You have Venom, you have Bond, you have Halloween Kills. And when these movies are going to be drawing people into the theater and doing pretty well, I think that those movies are going to do fairly well, regardless of streaming and the pandemic and everything. You have guess what they're going to be promoting in the theater, and when you go see this movie, they're going to be promoting Dune because they're going to, that's going to be the big like next ticket movie. So you're going to have the trailer attached to those movies. You're going to have posters, in the theater and banners and that type of stuff. So that's going to be huge as well, I think. And again, earlier I mentioned commercials and TV spots and things. I think this is looking really good for the domestic opening. I think right now, prior to this, people were probably thinking, they like very conservatively, probably thinking like 20s as far as like opening weekend here. I know the Suicide Squad, for example, just opened with like 28, I think was like the number. And of course, that's a rated R movie. That's a comic book movie. I think this could easily open more than that. And, Warner Brothers, their films this year having the streaming, access, their biggest opener has been like 31 million, which was Godzilla versus Kong. Space Jam opened with around 30 million as well. I think this could be their biggest opening of the year if they play their cards right, and if this buildup continues as it is. And if that opens at that number, it's gonna be hard to deny the success of this movie, regardless of what happens after the fact. I would imagine HBO Max numbers are probably gonna be pretty good as well. It was funny, someone mentioned on the TV side of things, I love Succession. It's one of my favorite shows. And that's an HBO show. And they just dropped the trailer for it yesterday. And that show comes out the week, a few days prior to Dune. So you're going to have people potentially signing up for HBO Max to watch that show, or people are going to be on HBO Max more that week to watch the show. And of course, they're going to be promoting Dune. They're going to be like, Dune comes out this week. And more people are going to be signed up to watch and be, have access to it. So I think the HBO Max numbers are going to be looking pretty good as well. And the biggest numbers they've had so far this year have been in the high, 2 million into the 3 million, 3.5 million range. So I think, again, if it's in those numbers, if it's in that range of these other successful movies by their own metrics, again, I've been optimistic the entire time, but I'm definitely feeling even more optimistic now.
And also HBO Max, I saw on Twitter, is having a promo where it's 50% off if you sign up now. Just saying, people, maybe you should sign up.
Yeah. And well, that's another thing too, talking about HBO Max. I know this was a story that kind of was, I think it was 3 or 4 days ago now. They were talking, I think it was Variety potentially, or Deadline was talking about how apparently Legendary had the option with Warner Brothers. We can push this to 2022 and just be theatrical, or we can do it now and have it as part of the HBO Max deal. And they made the decision to do it now. And there's a lot of factors, of course, that go into that decision, but I think ultimately that was the right one. Because not only are you burning more money the longer you wait to release a movie, but also how long can you delay a movie until people are just like, I don't care anymore. Like I don't even know when it's going to come out. I'm not excited for it. I think people, by the time they released the second trailer, they did the IMAX event, people were like, okay, I'm excited for Dune. Like, I want Dune to come out regardless of what's going on in the world. So I think the decision was right. And apparently in this deal, they said pretty much flat out to Villeneuve, to Legendary, if this does well in HBO Max, we're not going to worry too much about the box office. Like, the box office is what it is. Warner Brothers, I can tell you definitively, like, they have pretty much written off this year because AT&T, they went with this deal to do, promote HBO Max and to kind of, prop it up. They're not really, on all their movies, they're not really that worried about it. And they're not going to just stop making, Godzilla movies, or they're not going to stop making, Mortal Kombat or Conjuring movies just because it, underperformed in a pandemic. That's not going to happen. And I think when you have a franchise like this that has such potential, comparable to things like Lord of the Rings or, Harry Potter, other big Warner Brothers, franchises they've had, and Game of Thrones, that's another Warner, property. They are not going to give up because the box office is mediocre. And Villeneuve himself said prior to this opening, and he said this before, Venice even happened, it would have to be a disaster. Like, it would have to completely bomb and be very, very bad to, avoid at least part 2 happening. And what we're seeing now is the opposite of that scenario. So fingers crossed, but yeah, this is looking really good. I'm feeling really good. I'm excited, and I love just getting to see the people who have been doubting the entire time, or were pessimistic about, its odds, and are like, oh wow, well, I guess we were kind of wrong, or this is looking at, surprisingly good. I think that notion is going to kind of dissipate, and I think that's important as well for the US, because a lot of people in the US have been like, I don't know, I'm kind of doubting how that's going to go. So if that narrative can start to shift, even from, people in the mindset of, well, it's probably going to bomb and we're probably not going to get part 2, so who cares about part 1? Or I'm not, I might not go see it. I might just, stream it or whatever. If it's to the point of success where it's looking like part 2 is going to happen, I think that makes people more open to the fact that it is just a part 1, and yeah, you're going to get half the story essentially, but it looks like the second part is going to, come out whenever. So.
And I have seen that narrative a lot as well. And I think I just want to clarify that the fact that it's going on HBO Max, which again, I want to clarify is US only. So it's an important market, but it's one market. This is not a negative at all. I mean, the best experience to see Dune, you see it in the theater, you see it in IMAX. And I think the people who love film, the people who love Dune are going to do exactly that. What HBO Max is going to do is expand that reach. So we're still living in the middle of a pandemic. Not everybody feels comfortable in the cinema. Like, everybody has a different situation. So unfortunately, we're not going to have that huge box office like we did 2019 and before. So HBO Max is going to allow us to reach people that we otherwise wouldn't have reached. And there is going to be some level of cannibalism, but we've seen that trend. Movies that have done well in the box office have also done well on HBO Max. Movies that have not done well in the box office have not done well in HBO Max. So at the end of the day, it's about the quality of the movie, and I think just getting more eyes on this movie is critical, especially in this year. Let's actually go into some viewer questions. So the first one I want to do, actually, this is not a question, but I want to bring one of the comments from YouTube. So Chance says, it's interesting that Simon is French, but it seems he still hasn't commented onto the fact that Timmy is as well. I figured he'd be using the correct pronunciation of his name if no one else does. So Simon, I'll let you address that.
Excusez-moi, Monsieur Chalamet. So look, here's the deal. Yes, his dad is French. His mom is American, so that makes him French American. He is not super French. He does not talk like this. So, yeah, I know. My bad. Look, I just got onto the Timothée Chalamet fan club about a year ago. Well, maybe a couple of years ago when he was officially announced, and when we were getting closer to the movie, I was like, "Well, crap, I should watch some movies with this guy." And now I follow him on Instagram. I follow him everywhere. So, Monsieur Chalamet, si vous regardez ce podcast ou écoutez, je m'excuse. Mr. Chalamet, I am sorry. You are French. We both are a fan of football. If you ever want to come on this podcast, I will do the whole entire interview in French, and I will translate everything to these guys. My bad. Je m'excuse.
So the next question I wanted to go into was from Twitter. So James D. Eversole Jr., he says, do you think Villeneuve has already cast Fade Ralpha? Who do you think would be a great casting as Fade Ralpha? So let me start with you for this one, Mark.
I wouldn't have thought that they would have done any casting at all yet, since part 2 has not been greenlit officially. For Fade Ralpha, someone suggested on Twitter years ago, and I can't get him out of my head now, but the guy from Mr. Robot was in Queen of Bohemian Rhapsody.
Rami Malek?
Yeah, that's
really?
the guy. I think he'd make a great Fade myself. And the other option as well is this Stellan Skarsgård's son, who played Pennywise in It. So keep it in the family, maybe. I don't know, but those are my 2 suggestions.
It's interesting that people are so obsessed with the Fade Ralpha character. When I was talking to my friend in France, he's hardly in the books. We know who he is because of Sting. I don't know. Maybe that's just Sting made him an icon.
Yeah, and I think one of the factors there again, so we have Dune Part 1, which is going to cover more than half of the book, let's say, and in the third or Part 2, which is going to cover the end of the second part of the book and the third part of the book, is basically going to have the chance to really expand on a lot of things that maybe were smaller in the book. Like we've already seen what we've seen in the IMAX preview and what we've seen from the footage. They're taking this opportunity to expand on the characters. Like they've said, Lady Jessica, she was already an important character, but they're going more and exploring that character more. Same thing for the comments from Denis Villeneuve about the character of Chani, about how she's going to be a more important part of Part 2. So I do see them expanding the role of Fade in Part 2 as well, and making him a more important antagonist in that movie.
I understand where Dune Part 1 finishes the movie. In the book, Fade is only in one scene in the book. So I think it's an extremely smart decision to keep Fade for Part 2, because one, we're going to lose some characters in Part 1. So we need some additional people to replace them. And also it cuts down on the amount of introductions. As Garin, as he said, no one on Twitter has said it's confusing. And if we'd had Irulan, if we'd had the Emperor, if we'd had Fade, if we had the Fenrings in there, then those are more people that you need to explain who they are, what they're doing, why they're important. And the more people you add, the less time you've got for other characters. So yeah, I think keeping him for Part 2, completely the right choice.
Yeah, I think it was a really smart decision, like you said, Mark, to not overwhelm the audience in Part 2. And as tempting as it would be, because Fade is an iconic character, and he's almost a counterpoint in some ways to Paul. But to have that come out in Part 2, I think is the way that needs to be done. I guess my thought would be the same way Denis talked about how, early on, he was already thinking about, if I get the green light to do this Dune film, who's my Paul Atreides, who's my Lady Jessica. So whether he would admit it or not, I'm sure Denis has already maybe even settled on who his first choice would be for Fade. Again, I follow Ryan Brett, and his recommendation was the actor who plays Moriarty from the BBC Sherlock series. His name's Andrew Scott. I kind of like that choice. Again, Fade is a devious, manipulative character, and he's even devious and manipulative with his own people, right? I mean, he's from this family line of Harkonnens that are just, rotten to the core. So that was a suggestion I really liked. There's been some others thrown out that some of them felt interesting, some of them felt weird. But no, I'm excited because the Fade character really stood out to me when I read the book the first time. It was a character that somehow I don't know what it says about me, but somehow I connected to this character because he was trying to, maneuver and get his way, through this evil family, this traditional house that is so evil. So anyway, that's a great question to ask. It's fun to speculate on it. But my guess is that Denis he's already got his person chosen, but whether he's acted on that, probably not, because he's got to get the green light to go forward first.
And as much as I love Robbie Malek, like Mr. Robot is my favorite TV show of all time. That is one of the greatest storytelling ever. I can't picture Robbie Malek as Faye Rafa. I picture someone younger, like closer to Paul's age.
Johnny, do you have someone in your mind?
Yeah, I absolutely do. I already talked about this on Twitter, so you guys probably know who I'm talking about, but I have to prepare for my pitch, if you will. So my choice would be Barry Keoghan, who is a younger actor, and he's been in some big films, and people probably know him best from he was in Dunkirk. He played the kid on the boat who ends up getting in peril. And he appeared in The Green Knight this summer. He's going to be in Eternals in a couple months. And he also has a role in The Batman, which comes out next year. So he is perfect. I think he has, for example, Villeneuve is definitely aware of him and knows of him because he says his favorite contemporaries are Nolan and Lanthimos and Yorgos Lanthimos. And he's been in a Nolan film and he's been in a Lanthimos film. And Dunkirk, that was a big budget movie. It was a blockbuster movie. So he kind of has familiarity with that. And then in Killing of a Sacred Deer, which is probably my number one reason why I would want him, is because he plays an evil, manipulative, like psycho, like a true psychopath. And I think but he does it with like such like subtlety and like charm. And he does have like a strange charm about him. Like you can't really put your finger on it. And I think that's perfect, pitch perfect Fade, I think. And then of course he's going to be in the Batman. So he already has like a working relationship with Warner Brothers. He's going to get FaceTime in Eternals. That's a big Marvel superhero movie. And he has like a role in that as a hero. So I think that, people will know of him to an extent more after that movie comes out. And again, he's close in age. He's just a couple of years older than Chalamet. So I think that would work. Also, I think if you shaved his head and painted him white, he'd probably look pretty strange and intimidating and weird. So, and assuming that they keep that look for Fade, as all the Harkonnens already have that look, I think that would work as well. So that would be my pick.
Let's talk about the real picture that got leaked this week of Timothée Chalamet hanging out with Larry David.
That's actually okay. So that's funny. I love those pictures. That actually reminds me of another thing. Chalamet posted and Barry Keoghan posted them hanging out together in London like several times a couple of weeks ago, and that was when that's when I mentioned the Fade thing. So he knows Chalamet, like they're tight, they're hanging out and stuff. So hey, maybe Chalamet can get in Denis' ear if he doesn't, already have someone picked out or is interested in him.
So also from Twitter, Brett is an artist. He asks, do you think Dune Part 2 will get greenlit before the US release due to the nice international box office so far? Or is Warner and Legendary going to be super cautious and wait until December? Let's start with you, Johnny, for that one.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I would say pretty definitively, I'm going to say no on this one. It's not impossible. I'd say it's improbable to an extent. It just doesn't really, and I've said this before, it just doesn't really make that much sense, I feel, from like a business standpoint. a lot of them, I feel like a driving motivator, at least for fans of not just this movie, but the books, and then, Villeneuve and the characters and the actors in the movie. A driving force for them to go see this movie right now, and maybe not even just go see it once, but see it several times, see it in IMAX, tell people about it, is because everyone's riding on this fear that they're not going to greenlight part two. And so I think if if the numbers are outstanding in the next 2-3 weeks, maybe they're like, hey, Dune comes out next week and we're doing Dune part two, so go see this movie. You don't have to worry about it not getting a sequel. Just go enjoy the movie. But from another standpoint, why not incentivize people like, hey, you better go see this movie, or you're not going to get the rest of it. As cruel as that might seem, I think it makes business sense a little bit more, probably, at least right now, than it would be, hey, we're just going to do part two, go see part one, whatever. I think maybe I could see a scenario where it comes out in the US. It has a really, it has a good solid opening weekend. It gets, $35-40 million at the box office. It has 3 million people watch on HBO Max. I could see them like on Monday or Tuesday. They're like, hey, that was an amazing opening weekend. Like, let's put out a press release. We're going to do, we're going to do a part two. Villeneuve is really happy. Like, we're going to go ahead. And then that even gives us, oh, yay, well, we're feeling good. Let's go watch it again and just kind of celebrate. That kind of makes, I could see that being a scenario. It's something that happened with Wonder Woman last year. The movie came out. The box office was not great. We were kind of in the heat of the pandemic, even, maybe more so than we are now. And it had the HBO Max deal, but they came out on that at the end of that weekend. They're like, this was a great weekend. Like, we're going to do, Wonder Woman 3. Patty Jenkins is coming back and Gal Gadot's coming back. Of course, Wonder Woman 3 was probably going to happen no matter what. I think it's a little bit different. So maybe that won't be the situation here, but that's kind of how I see it, or at least I feel about it at this point.
Yeah, and I think, Johnny, that's a good point. I agree with you overall about this being improbable. But having said that, I'm leaning in the other direction in terms of, I think it would totally make sense. Like say that we're getting all this momentum going in Europe, and then of course we're going to have the US release, but not only US, we're going to have UK as well, and Canada and all the South American countries. So leading up to that, imagine if they said, like, basically the day before, like, Dune Part 2 is gonna happen, and really like motivating it from the positive perspective, because I would disagree. I don't think fear should be the motivator for people to see this movie. I don't really like the victim mentality that I see sometimes. I think people should be going to this movie as much times as they want, because they're enjoying it, because it's an awesome experience. They want to bring their friends, not because they're afraid. That's the whole theme of Dune. So I hope that's not the case. I want people to see the movie because they're loving it. And as Denis was saying, it has to be a disaster for there not to be a part two. But I want to hear, Garin, your perspective from the psychological point of view.
Yeah. So Johnny, I agree with you in the sense that from a business standpoint, and I think Hollywood has learned this, over the past 100 years, you think how an audience is going to respond to a film. And until it's out, you really don't know. And until you have a franchise, and then So the thought that came to my mind as you were both talking is some of the criticisms that I have read from people who have seen this film, it oftentimes it ends abruptly. I don't get the rest of the story. It's, I'm fully invested, and then it's over. And am I going to get a part two? Who knows? So it's like walking a razor's edge if you're Warner Brothers, because if maybe, like you were saying, Marcus, a week into it's announced that there's a part two, well, suddenly that constraint or that criticism of the movie ends abruptly is like, well, it's because the part two is coming and they're going to start shooting it next year. Then suddenly there isn't this hesitation or maybe an unwillingness to invest in this franchise because you don't know if you're going to get the rest of the story. So yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's pencil pushers over there at Warner Bros. That know better than me, and they're analyzing every piece of data. But you got to time that perfectly, I think, for the US audience. And I could see it going either way, actually.
I was just going to say, yeah, that's a great, I mean, you put it very well. And just to be clear, I don't condone the strategy of inciting fear as a motivator. But again, these corporations, they don't care about that. I mean, we're not holding them to some ethical standard at this point. So I hope that's not the case. I would love to see a sequel confirmed, you know, in 3 weeks, maybe, if the ticket sales are looking really good or something like that. That would be awesome. But yeah, no, I Garin made some really great points.
One of the interviews, Denis said we'll know by December. So I don't know if that's kind of the worst case scenario. But I was thinking, if Warner Brothers do make a decision based on the European and the rest of the world distribution of Dune, then probably sit on it until they decide it's the perfect time to announce that part 2, whether it's just before it releases in the States, the opening weekend, a week after, whatever. But I imagine Warner Brothers will have made up their mind before America launches, and once America bombs, then they'll have some announcement ready to go at the perfect time.
I think it's really interesting. I think it could go either way. But I wonder also, as you guys were talking about this, does the average person even know it's part 1? Or is it just Dune fanboys and fangirls right now? And film critics, is the average person going to walk in and being like, oh, it says part 1? Well, mental note, there's a part 2 coming out eventually. You know, are we so much inside baseball right now that we know we want a part 2, when the average Joe Schmo from Kokomo will just be like, oh, part 1. Well, I guess they're making a part 2. Cool.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say that's a good point as well, Simon. And I think you're right. No, I would say most people, absolutely, especially general audience and people who go see a few movies a year, they don't know that this is just half the movie. Like, they don't know this is half the story. And I think that's exactly why. Well, you know, I've seen, apparently there's 2 title cards for the movie. Apparently there's one in the opening and there's one at the end. The one at the end just says Dune. The one at the beginning says Dune part 1. And I think the reason that that's even in there is because they want to preface it. They'll, you know, when you're watching this entire movie, just keep in mind that this is not going to be the entire story, that there's going to be a sequel. Hopefully there should be a sequel. Because I think, yeah, if there was no part 1 title card at all, I think people would be like, well, what the hell? Or like there would be some sort of negative feelings about that. I think including the title card takes care of that to a degree. You know, everyone's going to feel differently about it. And Mark also raised a good point that Denis has said himself, December, like, but by December we should know. And I do think that is kind of like a worst case scenario. I think that would be in the instance where maybe these numbers, great opening numbers in Europe, and then like the international numbers are kind of like middling. And then in the US, like it doesn't come out like that well, like it just comes out kind of mediocre. I think at that point, then they would have to wait like a couple months into December and be like, okay, what are the long-term box office numbers? Like what did it ended up totaling? How are the Blu-ray like sales looking? Like how has the engagement been? Like they would have to look at a lot of things at that point and have discussions internally to make a decision. I think realistically, again, I am very optimistic. I think by November we should have an answer. I think, if they don't make an announcement before the US release, and maybe it's not, the week after it comes out, I think it would be soon after, like into November as the weeks roll on.
That was Dune Talk. That was our show for this week. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. So let's start with you, Mark. Where can people find you on social media? I'm
DuneInfo everywhere, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. Just search for DuneInfo and I should pop up, hopefully.
Simon?
S. Dowdy on Insta, Twitter, all that. I know we talk about thanking Denis for this, but let's also thank Frank Herbert for writing the source material that we keep, gushing over. And I just want to bring up 2 points. Lady of Caladan, book 2 of the Caladan trilogy comes out this week. And also, it looks like the paperback edition of the movie comes out this week. So I wonder if it's going to be a little bit different because of the beginning, how it's done in what we saw in the IMAX preview. And I'll probably end up buying it, and Mark probably has it already. So never mind.
Yeah, well, that's the Italian version, because that was the first version I could get that came out. But so I don't read Italian, but I needed the book from my bookshelf.
It's okay.
So
I buy random copies of it, like different covers. I think I'm gonna start trying to get international covers, like that French one that you showed. Yeah.
A friend of mine has got hundreds of copies of Dune from, I think, every language it's been published in. He's got a room full of books. It's incredible.
My girlfriend watches this YouTuber called The Potter Collector, and he has like different copies of Harry Potter in so many random languages. Pretty cool. Pretty nerdy, but I approve of it.
And just to avoid doubt, so like the book is getting different covers, but the contents of the book are not changing. So just any confusion about that. Yeah. Johnny?
Yeah, everyone can find me at Johnny Sobchak everywhere. I guess I'll do a shout out to all the fans that are supporting the movie. Like, wow, overseas in Europe and Asia and everywhere else where it's releasing right now. The numbers look amazing. The reactions have been amazing. And that's what we need. That's what we would like to see, ideally. And things are looking up. I'm glad to be optimistic. So the next few weeks are going to be interesting.
Garin?
Yeah, Garin at DuneCompanion.com on Twitter. I like to spend a lot of time on there. So I just love all the interaction people are putting forth on social media. I think that is really helping a lot of people become aware of this film. And so, I like the community. I optimistically, like you, Johnny, I believe this is going to be a fandom. I think it's going to be a big deal. And I like the culture of the fandom so far, if I can be that bold to say. It has a very unifying feeling that, at times people get a little tense about certain things. We won't go into that topic that happened last week, but people are unified. They're supporting one another, and the excitement is traveling throughout the group. So I'm really, really grateful for everyone's involvement that way.
Oh, before you say goodbye, Marcus, I just want to give a big shout out to Marcus because the site is a year old now.
What?
So, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, thank you guys. So this is Marcus Gabriel, your editor at DuneNewsNet.com, and I can't say how excited we are to be bringing you the news on a daily, weekly basis, whether it's through the site or through the show or social media. And there's a lot more to come. It's so exciting to be part of this community. I just want to thank everybody who's been involved. Thank all the people who are engaging with us on social media. And excited to talk to you all next week.
We hope you've enjoyed Dune Talk. Remember to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you know when the next episode drops. Stay tuned to DuneNewsNet.com and add us to your social feeds. Be the first to hear breaking news and reviews.